Welcome back to my Capstone engagement, which is the assessment, analysis, and hardening of a vulnerable system. My name is Erica Sue Watkins. This is just a little bit about me that I covered in more detail in the introduction video. Here we can see our table of contents. We covered the network topology in my first introduction video. You can go back and view that if you missed it. This video is going to cover the red team security assessment, and the following two blue team topics will be covered in the next two videos. We will be continuing to go over my red team actions here. There are two additional steps for the red team. The first is going to be the penetration testing. This is the step most people consider more exciting. But the second step is the most important, which is the security assessment that's based off of that testing. This is the most crucial step because this report is what an organization who is requesting pen testing wants out of this. They want to know where they fail and how they can improve. As mentioned before, the first step in pen testing is reconnaissance, which in this instance was obtained through an Nmap scan. Here's the summary describing the target. We have the host name here, which is the name used by computers to identify themselves to each other. Next, we have the IP address here, which the network uses to identify each of these machines. And lastly, we have the role on the network, which we determined based off of which ports were open in the Nmap scan. So we have our Azure host machine, the ELK server for log analysis and visualization, our web server, and our pen tester machine or attacker. This is my vulnerability assessment. My assessment uncovered 5 critical vulnerabilities in the target. The first vulnerability uncovered was open or unfiltered ports. This allowed for port scans, and the impact was that it revealed the IP address of servers and all open ports, which can be used to gain unauthorized access. The next vulnerability was the directory listing or hidden directory access. This allowed access to directory listings as well as access to those hidden directories. The impact is allowing this unauthorized access to these directories and files, which can contain sensitive data. The third vulnerability I found was brute force attack. This allowed a brute force attack in order to retrieve passwords. And the impact is that it allows the attacker to gain access to passwords in order to gain unauthorized access to the machine and files within it. As I continued the vulnerability assessment, I found unrestricted file uploads through WebDAV connections. This vulnerability allowed PHP files or executables to be uploaded through a WebDAV connection. The impact is that these malicious scripts can obtain access to sensitive information or even take complete control over a target machine. The last vulnerability I discovered was the PHP Reverse Shell payload, which allows a host machine to set up a listener that will use a reverse TCP connection once the infected PHP file is activated on the target machine. The impact is that this connection allows complete access to the target machine. User shells can be created, files can be viewed, and most commands and programs can be executed. So this is definitely the most critical vulnerability found in my analysis. Now we will go into a little more of the details for each exploitation that was discovered. The first being open or unfiltered ports. The tools and processes used for this exploitation were Nmap, which was used to scan and discover the IP address of servers and all their open ports. Then Firefox was used to gain access to the web server directories. Through this, the web server IP address was identified due to port 80 HTTP being open. This allowed access to the directory of the web server to be viewed within a browser. So here we can see the Nmap scan. This is the command entered to receive these results. I ran this command, which showed a result of 4 machines and all their open ports that you can see here. Since only one machine had port 80 open, which is used for HTTP, it was determined that that was the web server. With the IP address of this web server, I was able to go to Firefox, enter the address in here in the URL, and get a full directory of what is contained within the web server shown here. From here, I was able to click on each of these directories and view the files within them as well. The next exploitation that I explored was the directory listing and hidden directory access. As mentioned before, I used the IP address obtained through the Nmap scan, and Firefox was used to access the web server's directory listing. Through this, we were able to explore the files within the directories, get a location of a hidden directory, and then type that hidden directory within the URL in Firefox, which through a pop-up window gave me a username needed for accessing this hidden directory. As demonstrated in the previous exploitation, I was able to gain access to the directory in the browser. Here we can see where I was exploring the various directories through the web browser that they mention this hidden directory shown here. It says that it is no longer accessible to the public, but all you have to do is enter the directory in your browser into the URL, and it will ask you for a username and password. They also made the mistake of mentioning here that it's for Ashton's eyes only. So I already know that the username needed to access this hidden directory is Ashton. Next, I was able to get into the next exploit, which was the brute force attack. For this, I used Hydra to brute force attack the hidden directory for passwords. Once Hydra was able to obtain a password, I was able to use Firefox to access the hidden directory. This exploit gave a username and password that could be used to gain unauthorized access to WebDAV and the target machine. Here we can see the Hydra command that I entered. We have the username Ashton here, the dictionary list of rocku.txt, the IP address of the server here, and the hidden directory that we're going to be focusing this search on. This command will take a few minutes to run, and it will do a brute force attack with all the words in its list to determine the password for the specified username. Once it is complete, it will display the username and password here. With this information, I was able to then go back to Firefox in the hidden directory and use this username and password to access the files within. There is only one file, this connect to core server, but this file had a lot of information in it. You can see here the instructions for how to access the WebDAV connection. And then here we have a username and a hashed password. Since it is a hash, it will need to be decoded, but that's a pretty simple process. We just need to enter this into crackstation.net, and we have our access. So this is a lot of information that we have that can now be exploited. The next exploitation that I worked on was unrestricted file upload. For this, I had a PHP file with a reverse TCP payload that was uploaded to the remote system. MSF Venom was used to create the PHP file. Then File Manager and WebDAV were used to upload the file to the remote machine. Through this, I achieved the exploit planted with the connection payload. And this payload would create a user shell that would allow for various post-exploit actions. The first step of exploiting the unrestricted file upload through the WebDAV server is to create the PHP file with the reverse TCP shell payload. This is done with MSF command, shown here, to create that shell.php file. This will take a few minutes to run, and then it will show up in the directory in which you ran the command, which in this instance was my root directory. So we can see that here. Then I just opened another file manager window here and follow the webdev instructions to get to the webdev folder. Next, I took the hash from the previous exploit, entered it into crackstation.net, and I was able to take this password with the username Ashton to log in to the webdev server in the file manager here. Once I had access, I was able to just drag and drop the shell payload file from my root directory over to the remote machine through File Manager, and my payload was set up, shown here. The last exploit that we will go over is the PHP Reverse Shell payload. For this, I used Metasploit with the multi/handler exploit to set up a listener on the attacker machine. After that, I then used Firefox to activate the payload PHP file that I had uploaded previously. This achieved a user shell that could be used to access sensitive information or do a variety of post-exploit actions, including complete remote control of that target machine. Now that the payload is set up, a listener on the attacker machine can be set to connect to the target machine. The first step is to open MSF console using this command here. We'll do this on our attacker machine. Then we'll use the exploit multi-handler, set our payload, set our lhost or local host, and then we'll use this command here to start the listener. At this point, you will see right where the red arrow is, just a black area, and that means that the attacker is listening. So the next thing to do is to connect the target machine to this listener that we just opened. So I'm going to open up a web browser and navigate to the webdev folder, as shown here, where I previously uploaded the PHP file. I'm going to use the same username and password that I used previously to log in, and then I'm just going to double click on this shell.php file here. At this point, the target machine is connected to the attacker's listener. You won't be able to see much happening here, but you should be able to see a little circle spinning up here in where I circled this red circle, and that's the indicator that it's working. The other way to tell is to obviously go back to the terminal where the listener was set up. This section here will start immediately, and you'll know that you're connected once you see this interpreter prompt at the bottom here. This is the user shell that has been created now. And through this shell, an attacker will have full access to that machine, where they can perform most commands, execute programs, view files, and a variety of post-exploit actions. Pen testing can be a bit of a daunting task. There is a lot of things that you must go through in order to find the things that aren't working, that are vulnerable. It can be very exhausting. You will try many things. You will fail at many things. You will get back up again, and after enough failing in enough different ways, you will find the vulnerabilities that exist. And with that information, those vulnerabilities can be fixed. So this is just the process. Try not to get frustrated by it, and remember these key words. Keep on going, and the chances are that you will stumble on something, perhaps when you are least expecting it. I have never heard anyone ever stumbling on something sitting down. Charles F. Kettering. The point here is that you just must keep going and keep trying, and this is how you get to the results. Thank you so much for watching. That concludes my red team analysis. Please comment and share. The blue team analysis will continue in my next video. Lastly, here is credit again for the presentation template I used for these videos from Slides Go.